made with our schools, with our education, which is something that should be of interest and is of interest to every single Pennsylvanian. And I want to thank everybody here, all the legislators, all the advocates, for joining all of us in this celebration. When I came into office back in January of 2015, our schools were struggling. After devastating budget cuts, and I think if you remember this, had forced teacher layoffs, the elimination of education programs, and in not just a few cases, but in many cases, massive property tax increases. And I promised the Pennsylvanians, the people of Pennsylvania, the voters of Pennsylvania when I was running and after I got into the office, that I would work with the legislature to make sure that we change that. And the passionate people behind me today were key to making that happen. We all recognize that we need to recognize that education is our future. It's not just the future of the children in our schools and the children to come. It's a future for all of Pennsylvania. So in the first 6 years of my term as governor, my administration secured an increase of $1.4 billion, with a B, billion dollars in education funding, and that was a huge success.
Yeah.
So how about it?
Yeah.
But actually, after the cuts that had been made to education funding under previous administrations, and in the face of the changing needs of schools and students, it was clear throughout that process that a lot more needed to be done. And that's why I was honored to sign this year's budget. It's really an important step. This budget includes the largest education funding increase in the history of this Commonwealth. That is a $416 million investment increase in our investment in high-quality education in every community across the Commonwealth. It shows every student that we care about their education and we care about their future. It reminds every mom and every dad in Pennsylvania that we, as a Commonwealth, are invested in the success of their children, of our children. And it's going to help the next generation of Pennsylvanians to succeed right here in Pennsylvania, not in Texas, not in California, but right here. This is an important step in fulfilling our commitment to schools, to students, and educators. So what does this budget include? It includes $200 million increase in the fair funding formula, a $50 million increase in special education. It includes a $30 million increase for early education, and there are a lot of other things. And thanks to the hard work and advocacy, in addition to all those other things, thanks to the hard work and advocacy of Representative Mike Schlossberg, who's behind me here, who will speak in a minute, we also have an extra $100 million invested in helping the most underfunded schools in Pennsylvania. His new Level Up initiative is a groundbreaking program that will provide more equitable funding to 100 of Pennsylvania's most underfunded school districts. It's going to help us level the playing field and make sure students in these underfunded districts are not left behind. This is going to help school districts in many of our larger cities, but it's also going to benefit school districts in our rural communities as well. I have visited those underfunded communities, rural and urban, and it's clear that our funding does not treat every student the same. Every student deserves a chance to learn, and Level Up is going to help give them that chance. This is a life-changing investment for students across the Commonwealth and the communities they live in. So I want to thank again all of you who fought for this funding. Thank you for continuing to advocate for the needs of Pennsylvanian students and schools and their parents. But now the truth is, here's the truth. This is an important step forward and it's worthy of celebration, but we still have work to do. We still have a long way to go before education in Pennsylvania is fully and fairly funded, adequate and fair funding. We don't have that yet, even with this good budget. In 2016, our Commonwealth enacted a fair funding formula, chaired by a Republican senator and a Republican representative. It was a fair funding formula to fix our broken approach to funding education, which still distributes the majority of school funding based on student enrollment back in 1992. The fair funding formula was a major bipartisan achievement, but because it only applied to new funding, we're now only at the stage where 85% of investment, the investment that comes from this building to our public schools is still stuck 30 years in the past, 85%. So 15% is now going out according to the fair funding formula, still leaves 85% that is not. I was disappointed that we couldn't come to an agreement to send all the basic education funding through the fair funding formula this year. That's what I asked for in my budget, and frankly, we almost got there this year. We almost did it, but not quite. But that's what our Commonwealth really needs to ensure that every school district gets the resources they need to serve students and provide the high-quality education that will put our Commonwealth on the path to future success. We all need that. Not just the kids and the educators and the school districts that are being left behind, but we all need this. So I promise you that I will continue to fight for schools, students, and communities all across this Commonwealth. In the meantime, let's celebrate this victory today. And tomorrow, let's use this victory as a stepping stone to continue our fight for full and fair funding for all schools in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much. Now I'm very proud to turn this over to Joanna McClinton, the minority leader of the State House of Representatives. Leader McClinton.
Thank you, Governor. Can we take a moment to acknowledge Governor Wolf's hard work to fairly fund every school across the Commonwealth? We know that today we're celebrating what is in fact a victory, but it's a small victory when we think about all of the other school districts across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who need more support from the state to have fair funding. Our Constitution doesn't say a whole lot as it relates to mandates, but it does tell my colleagues, 253 of us in the legislature, to thoroughly and provide our children a thorough and efficient education. And for far too long, our funding has not been what is necessary for a thorough and efficient education. Will you say, Rep. McClinton, what difference does it make? Well, it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference for our children, for our parents that are struggling. What difference does it make? It means computer labs for some children, but not for others. It means STEM labs for some children and not for others. It means librarians and teachers and counselors for some children, but not the other. And I am grateful for the partners that are here today. Because of our collective advocacy, we've got this small win. We've got Level Up going to the 100 most underfunded school districts across the Commonwealth. And what's most exciting is what we can announce that we've not been able to in recent history, Governor Wolf, is there's money in the bank. What's that money in the bank doing? Well, we didn't want to put it there, but some folks decided it was a good idea. But we are determined that when we return to session, that we will ensure that that money in the bank goes to the property tax payers that need a property tax break, goes to the homeowners whose school boards keep increasing their rates because there's not enough money to fund the schools. But we've got the money in the bank to do it, and these folks behind me, my colleagues that are here today, representatives Patty Kim and Tim Briggs, Pete Schweier, and Mike Schlossberg, who you'll hear from in a second, we are determined to go back in this building with these advocates and keep fighting. The words for today are keep fighting. This is a small victory, but we are going to keep fighting. Let me hear you say it one more time. Keep fighting. That's what we must do for every child across the Commonwealth. Please welcome our colleague, Representative Mike Schlossberg.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Governor, and thank you all. Picture two schools. One school is a middle school, built in 1871 when the Civil War was known as that thing that just ended. Its heating system works, sometimes, but more often than not, its HVAC system is an open window. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as a school built for a time before electricity was widely available cannot reasonably be expected to educate students in an internet age. Compare that to a nearby suburban district, just to the west. Students attend a high school that is a mere 20 years old, has separate wings for art, music, and gym, and is quite literally shaped like the Millennium Falcon. Literally, Google that. Such is the reality for students in my legislative district. The first school is Harrison Morton Middle School, which actually, Governor, you visited a few years ago as part of a conversation about the pressing needs facing disadvantaged urban districts. Thousands of Allentown students are expected to learn foundational skills for their entire lives between Morton's ancient walls. The second is Parkland High School, the jewel of the suburban Parkland School District. One of these schools guarantees a chance at success at a far greater degree than the other. This situation is replicated throughout the entire Commonwealth, where a student's zip code will be an overriding factor in their success in life. This is a stain on our efforts to build a better Pennsylvania. All of this informed my advocacy for the Level Up funding program, legislation that I introduced in April as part of a conversation with a variety of other school advocates. Level Up was part of the fiscal code and will be signed into law shortly. And its adoption represents an acknowledgement of what many of us have advocated to be a fundamental truth. Our poor school students do not get the fair and equal education they deserve. While there is much to be proud of about Pennsylvania, there are certain things we should be embarrassed by. Chief among them, Pennsylvania is 44th in the nation in terms of per capita spending on our students, and we are dead last in terms of the gap between our richest and poorest school districts. A fundamental tenet of any educational system should be that a student can get a world-class education regardless of where they live. We have historically failed to meet that challenge. Our fair funding formula does remarkable work in alleviating those differences, but as the governor said, a mere 15% of our total educational spend goes through that formula. This means that our poorest school districts need more help, and they need it now. Level Up starts to get us there. Now, for me at home, Level Up means an additional $6.4 million in badly needed aid to the cash-strapped Allentown School District. It helps a slew of other cities, including Harrisburg, York, Philadelphia, Reading, and more. That being said, this is not a city-exclusive plan. Dozens of the districts helped by Level Up are deeply rural. The pain shared by these districts is bipartisan. Of the 100 districts that will see major investments under this plan, 78 are at least partially represented by a Republican, while a mere 52 are partially represented by a Democrat. Let me say that again. More Republican-represented districts are helped by Level Up rather than Democratic ones. Districts across the state, comprised of a slew of different backgrounds, economies, and racial constituencies, they need our help. They need our investment, and we are making a down payment. We are acknowledging that kids from Northampton and Northumberland, from Lehigh and Lebanon, from Montgomery and Mercer, they all have much more in common than many of us often recognize. Now, it's been said before, and I'll say it again, Level Up is not the goal. It's a starting point. It is my hope that we can expand this program into the future so that we can continue to help struggling school districts. Now, next year, because of our work, the Allentown School District will be in a better position to replace Harrison Morton Middle School and give the children of Allentown the kind of educational facilities they deserve. Next year, our students can start to get an educational quality that is a little bit closer to the ones that our students in Parkland receive, and this will be replicated all across the state. Because of the work of our governor, House Democrats, and our valued legislative partners, we are one step closer to achieving a dream that has eluded so many: a fairly, fully educational system, one that will leave its mark on the students of Pennsylvania for years and years to come. Thank you. And on that note, it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Hughes. Senator Street. All right. We're going to go on, and it's my pleasure then to introduce the Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Secretary Ortega.
Thank you. Pleasure. Well, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Governor Wolf, for inviting me to join everyone on this historic day in celebration of education in Pennsylvania. I'm honored to stand alongside our governor, lawmakers, educational advocates, school leaders, and many others to highlight the important investments being made and the impact of our schools, communities, Commonwealth, now and well into the future. Today marks the official end of the 2021 school year, the end of the year that was like none other than before and filled with intense challenges, deepened disparities, and unthinkable barriers. However, our school leaders, our students, our parents, and our families, they persevered. It's clear that this past year has disproportionately impacted students, educational communities, especially our most vulnerable populations. We're gathered here today to make sure every person knows today that help is on its way and more is to come. The state budget invests in places that we know resources are needed the most. Help our school communities mitigate the learning gaps, break down barriers, build equitable learning opportunities and environments for all folks, and move forward towards a stronger and something that we could work collaboratively together on. While academics are a priority, I want to remind everyone here that they aren't the only educational service in critical need of support. After this past year, the state budget also helps our community's partners hire staff to implement programs that address social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students. And the work that needs to be done to fully recover from the disruption of the pandemic, it is not only for our schools to do or should do alone, it's for others in the educational ecosystem to also step in and help. The state budget, combined with federal funding, create opportunities to invite our entire educational ecosystem to the table in effort to collaboratively address all concerns. This includes addressing disparities, inequities, and developing solutions that will serve the students of the Commonwealth. Now, who are these students? This includes our neighbors, students in neighboring counties, our own nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and even our own case, in some cases, our own children. In other words, this means our future. Governor, members of the General Assembly, on behalf of the Department of Education, the millions that we serve, thank you for this incredible and important investment in our future. And while there remains a tremendous amount of work to be done by the department and others, we look forward to the path ahead. Thanks again for the opportunity to be with you today. And now I invite Tamia to the platform to share some words as well.
Thank you, Secretary. Good morning. My name is Tamia Scipio-Smith. I'm the Education Policy Director at Public Citizens for Children and Youth, PCCY, a member of the Level Up Coalition and the PA Schools Work Campaign of Education Advocates. Groups that are here today and all strongly support adequate and equitable funding for Pennsylvania's students. We know we have a long way to go, but we say thank you to Governor Wolf and the PA legislature for increasing state education funding. In a year with so many uncertainties, this increase will touch the lives of 1.7 million of Pennsylvania's public school students and get their learning back on track. For far too many years, some students have needed much more than a touch. They needed a lift, a way to level the playing field, because they go to school in districts without the resources to adequately serve them. They live in a state where the wealthiest school districts spend on average $4,800 more per student than the poorest. That is not fair, that is grossly inadequate, and it is certainly not equitable. But this year, the legislature recognized that. You, Governor Wolf, Leader McClinton, and so many other legislators took a step in the right direction to change that. And we could not have done that without Representative Schlossberg and taking the initiative to introduce the Level Up Supplement, because it gets fairer funding to the 100 most underfunded school districts, Pennsylvania's most underserved students for whom profoundly inadequate resources sadly remain the norm. While we celebrate that the education funding gap is closing, we acknowledge that it isn't closing fast enough. We cannot leave one more generation of children in poor districts ill-prepared for challenges and demands of tomorrow. We cannot let one more child's dream of equity be deferred. Their futures, our workforces, tax base, and the state's economy hinges upon our decisions to do better. To turn the tide, consistent, adequate, equitable, and fair education funding must become our new norm. Every year, we must significantly invest in our students' education, and every year, we must level up and close gaps for our underserved children. We implore every lawmaker in Pennsylvania to keep up the momentum and adequately and equitably fund our schools. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce one of the most profound advocates for our schools, Superintendent Stephen Rodriguez.
Good morning. On behalf of the Pennsylvania League of Urban Schools, a caucus of PASA, and on behalf of the Pottstown School District, my district, I would like to thank you, Representative Schlossberg, other esteemed members of the state legislature, and Governor Tom Wolf, as well as the growing community of education advocates who help support this education funding. Several months ago, when I was asked to speak on behalf of this proposed legislation, I said that Level Up legislation falls far short of a fully funded, fair funding formula. However, I also said this funding may not be a touchdown, but it is a solid first down because it addresses some of the inequity in our current funding structure. It is a solid first down and ensures that students who need this funding most get it first. The way you get touchdowns and eventually win the game is a series of first downs. So we cannot stop here. Continual positive progress down the field of play wins the game not only for our students, because they'll be citizens one day, it wins the game for our state. Some of you may know that just last week, dozens of advocates were arrested while protesting about this issue in the building behind me. Some of you may also know that on these steps where we stand, thousands of citizens have come to voice their support for their hometown schools and for use of the fair funding formula. The people of our state are speaking up and taking action on this issue, so we can't stop here. I am so appreciative to the legislature and the governor for using a bipartisan approach that spends education dollars more equitably, where they have needed it most. My career as superintendent started about 5 years ago, and this is the most significant progress for my school district in those 5 years. For my own district, the $1.4 million we will receive gets applied immediately to student programs, to student resources, and we are grateful. But my community has also been loud and clear in reminding me that we have been underfunded by $11 to $13 million every year. Parents and community leaders were quick to point out that while everyone wants a rainy day fund to fall back on, for students in our districts, it's been raining for a long time. The Level Up funding is a golden drop of sunshine through that rain, but we must keep going. I look forward to brighter days ahead, and I know I speak on behalf of so many educators and students everywhere when I say this is progress and a big step in the right direction. Thank you. Governor Wolf.
So now we will be happy to take questions. Yes. Yes. Is that on? There you go.
And so I just wanted to ask, there's also been a threat that the Republicans would run constitutional amendments, which you have no control over, for voter ID. You then vetoed HB 1300, which some experts I've talked to have said this is a more liberal proposal on voter ID. Are you concerned about what that veto and implications for constitutional amendments in the future?
No. I think the people of Pennsylvania in general do not want to see voter suppression in Pennsylvania. We don't want to be Arizona or Texas or any of Florida or any of the other states. We believe our democracy is important. We want people to be able to vote. And so I don't think the people of Pennsylvania want HB 13, which is why I vetoed it.
There is polling that indicates that voter ID is broadly popular in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Don't forget we have voter ID, and in terms of if you go to a new polling place, you have to show some form of identification. So we have that. The question is, are we satisfied that that's enough? And I think we can have that conversation. They're having that conversation in the District of Columbia. The point is, the voter ID that was talked about in HB 1300 is not the voter ID that I think is reasonable. It's selectively discriminatory, and it suppresses the vote. Yes. All right, yeah, go ahead.
Governor, school district officials I've been talking with, while grateful, as these folks are, for this increase in funding, they're also very concerned about charter school expenses that they're incurring. And I know that that was something that you were really pushing, but do you think that there is a path forward in addressing this cost driver for school districts that you could get the Republicans to buy into?
I hope so. I think. I mean, I don't. You know, I should talk to you, but I think this is something that affects school districts in Republican and Democratic areas. It is really a bipartisan thing, and actually, the first person to tell me that this was an issue was a Republican member of the House of Representatives. So I think this is truly a bipartisan thing. I don't know why we haven't gotten traction yet, but I'll keep trying. Again, and I'll say this. I'm sure Mark wrote an article. You know, when we're making do with what we have, I think it just reaffirms how nice it would be if we had a majority in this General Assembly, and we could actually do things that helped the people of Pennsylvania. Until then, we have to sort of work at the pleasure of whatever the opposition wants, and so far they have not seen fit to push forward this kind of reform of the charter schools. Yeah.
Governor, if memory serves, your February budget request had included a little more than $1 billion for basic education, even with all these funded elements. And I know that people have addressed this.
A lot more than $1 billion, $1.3 billion, actually.
So, but even with all these funded elements, what's in this budget is less than half of that. Was the compromise worth it?
Yeah. It was a step for, what did you call it? A first down. It was another first down. We're still in the game. We still have the ball. But I don't think anybody, including me, has said that this is where we want to be. It's a step. Anything else? Yeah, Mark.
Governor, can you talk a little bit about your decision to repeal the overtime regulation that you worked so hard on?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said to Jan. I mean, this is what you do when you're trying to get the best possible budget you can. And I think we've done a lot of things for some of the poorest kids in Pennsylvania by doing this. But it's not a whole loaf. And I think it's a reminder of where we need to be as Pennsylvanians, as a General Assembly. We need to have a majority Democrats in the Senate and the House. And until we get that, we're going to have to make decisions and make compromises that really aren't what we would do if we didn't have to make those compromises. I think we ended up in a much better place than we were net before, but there were things that we had to give up that I lament. And that in particular, I was the author of that. So and I think it's just something that when we're trying to get a fair and prosperous Pennsylvania, we can't have people who are being cheated out of their rightful compensation, and we can't have people who are being cheated out of their rightful education. We need to have a fairer, better Pennsylvania. I think we made a step forward. It's not the full step that any of us would have liked if we had a perfect world.
Governor, the latest information from the federal government on the opioid deaths, on drug deaths in the state, still shows Pennsylvania is the third highest in the country in terms of number of deaths. On a per capita basis, we're 6th or 7th, but you've had the COVID crisis expire. You now have the disaster in place for opioids. Is there something new or different or some new approach you can take to this problem that's killing so many Pennsylvanians?
That's a really fair point. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think we were at the point when we started, if you recall, back before the pandemic, and we had a bipartisan declaration to declare a disaster, and we really made progress on the opioid epidemic. I think I went to 70 different roundtables around the Commonwealth, and I know folks here were doing the same kind of thing. And I think the numbers were showing that back at that point we were one of the worst in terms of our record, and we were really making rapid improvements. And then the pandemic hit, and that all came to a crushing halt. We have worked through the pandemic to try to figure out what we can do. We've continued to meet. The task force has continued to meet. We've continued to have disaster declarations, and we are working night and day to figure out what we now know what we need to do to get back on track. So you make a really important and valid point. Pennsylvania is not where we need to be, and we need to get back to work on this. And it's not just, by the way, the opioid epidemic. I mean, mental health issues. There are just all kinds of issues that have surfaced in the course of the pandemic that we need to redouble our efforts to do a better job. We need to do a better job.
Back to the election reform
Yeah.
issue. You vetoed the line item for the election audit.
Yes.
I was just wondering, did you at all consider maybe keeping that in and letting that be a point of negotiation to try to get?
We decided to do the reverse. I actually had a long conversation with the speaker beforehand. I actually called him just before I did the line item veto and said, I'm happy to work with you. What the concern I had was that this was going to be another effort to relitigate the 2020 presidential election. And I think 8 months on, let's move on. If you want to have another, we already do 2 audits of elections. The counties have to do, each county has to do one, and then we have the Department of State does another audit. If you want another audit, I'm fine with that. We have the legal system, as we saw, where you can appeal the outcomes in different ways. So I think we all agree that prospectively we can maybe do some things to make our elections even better than they are, as fair and accurate and open as they were these past couple of elections. Maybe there's some things we can do. So I'm open to that. But I thought it would be better to say, listen, if this gets to me to look like it's getting to 2020 election, and we're rehashing that 8 months after the fact, and after another election had been held, the May primary election in the meantime. That's not what I want here. So if that's what I think is happening, I'll line item vetoed, and we'll sit down over the summer and we'll figure out how to get to the right place here. So I think I negotiated it the right way.
Yeah. Governor, where did the idea for new tax breaks for data centers come from? Is this something that you were comfortable with?
Me.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they came from other people too, but I think it's a good idea, so I'll take credit for it.
They don't employ very many people, though, right?
What?
They don't employ very many people, though, right? I mean, on average, a couple dozen people here and there, right?
They do in terms of construction, and I think that you're talking about just one data center doesn't, but if we can become there are a lot of reasons why I think Pennsylvania is a natural for data centers. We have a lot of electricity generated in Pennsylvania. We're the Keystone State. We have we're inland, so we're off. As you get inland, we're off the I-95 corridor, so we have some security issues that are lessened. So I think there are a lot of reasons why. Of course, we have a great workforce. And there are a lot of jobs in the construction of these data centers. So I think this is a good thing for Pennsylvania. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you again.